the LBC app.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, France is among other nations expected to join the UK tonight in recognising a Palestinian state. Israel and the US are fiercely opposed to the move as the UN General Assembly gathers in New York. Donald Trump's spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt says recognising a Palestinian state will reward Hamas.
The president has been very clear. He disagrees with this decision, and he feels this does not do anything to release the hostages, which is the primary goal right now in Gaza, does nothing to end this conflict.
Meanwhile, Danny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the UN, says a two-state solution was taken off the table after the October the 7th attack. He's called the talks at the UN a charade. Russia's been warned it risks a direct armed confrontation with Britain and its NATO allies. The Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper's accused Moscow of reckless actions at a UN meeting after its planes flew into Estonian airspace on Friday. 6 charities have removed the Duchess of York as patron. It's after Sarah Ferguson emailed convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein in 2011 to apologise for publicly disowning him. And body care is to disappear from Britain's high streets. Administrators have announced the closure of its remaining 56 shops this week. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 10 points at 92.26. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.14. LBC weather staying mainly dry across the UK tonight. A few showers possible in the far southeast, lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. We've got a very chatty panel with us tonight. It's 2 minutes past 8. Let me try and bring some order to our proceedings. There was one day last week when I failed to bring order at all in the entire hour, the one with David Starkey, as you might imagine. Amy Hart is here, influencer, TV personality and former Love Island contestant. Do you wish that we wouldn't introduce you as that, or are you happy with
I'm
that?
proud of being on Love Island.
Excellent, good. Gillian Keegan has never been on Love Island yet, although she does have a husband, so that probably means she shouldn't go. Former Conservative MP and Education Secretary. Caroline Flint is here, former Labour MP and Government Minister under Gordon Brown. And Tony Blair? Yes. And Gordon Rayner, Associate Editor of the Daily Telegraph. So they're here to take your calls on 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 and you can watch us on Global Player and the LBC app.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Well, let's take a text question from Scott in West Hampstead, who says the government's recognition of Palestinian statehood appears to have pleased Hamas, but has angered the Israeli government. Should the British government have made this contingent upon Hamas releasing all of the hostages, laying down their arms and relinquishing any future role in the governance of a Palestinian state? Gordon Rayner, let's start with you. Can you give us a little bit of context to this, because it does seem the most extraordinary thing for Keir Starmer to have done, in the sense that he said, well, we'll do this if the Israelis don't do X, Y and Z. And you thought, well, if you really believe in it, surely you wouldn't have these kind of conditions.
Yes, I mean, Caroline may disagree with me, but I think that he's been forced into doing this because he's desperately trying to hold the Labour Party together. There were a lot of people on the left of the party, as you know, Ian, who are very active on this whole Gaza issue, who have been desperate for Britain to recognise Palestine as a state for a long time. And I think that Starmer tried to sort of sit on the fence for as long as he possibly could. He's now found himself pushed into a position where he didn't feel he could hold out any longer. And the fact that other countries have done this, I think he felt he could sort of almost, row in behind them and maybe dilute the impact of what he's just done.
Does seem to have been an extraordinary thing to do the day before a major Jewish holiday.
Yes, but, we've had a lot of politicians who have had tin ears about this sort of thing. And I was very struck today by the sight of the embassy, what is now the embassy for Palestine, Hussein Zomlot, who is now the ambassador of the state of Palestine to the UK. He was surrounded by Labour figures who were all tweeting, taking selfies. Jeremy Corbyn was there, interestingly enough. Anas Sarwar was there. Wes Streeting was there. I was a little bit surprised at that. Rosina Allen Khan was there. This chap, Hussein Zomlot, he's a little bit like Jeremy Corbyn when Corbyn got himself into trouble for laying wreaths at the graves of what people described as terrorists. He has lionised a guy called Ghassan Kanafani, who was a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. He was killed in May 1972 by Mossad after being accused of taking part in the massacre of 26 people at Ben Gurion Airport. Not really the sort of person that maybe if you want to be the next Labour leader, you would want to be standing next to doing selfies, but there they were.
Well, I've interviewed Mr. Zomlot on several occasions. He's always struck me as being quite a reasonable advocate of the Palestinian cause.
Well, maybe, but, he was asked only a couple of years ago if he condemned the murder of several Israelis, and he said no, he couldn't condemn that. So, I'm afraid I can only judge him on his words.
Caroline?
The Labour Party, as actually I think most of the mainstream political parties in the UK, have always supported a two-state solution to find peace, both for Israel but also resolve the issue about Palestinians. I mean, there are, I think, around 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank, and 1.4 million in Gaza, another 6 million spread across Syria, Lebanon and Jordan. And this has been going on for decades and decades. And in terms of the recognition of a Palestinian statehood, I think in some respects, in all honesty, all politicians, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, are affected by what's going on domestically within their own parties and those that they are in alliance with. But I think the bigger issue here is nearly 2 years after the 7th of October and the outrage, quite rightly, caused by the murder of innocent people at that concert. Where are we today? The hostages aren't all home. And in terms of Scott's question, there is no question that the Labour government expect all hostages to be released. There is no question.
Does this make it more likely? Well,
I think what we've got here is everyone to realise the fact that the Labour government in the UK have recognised the statehood of Palestine. The French, the Canadians, Australians have done as well, and will make that clear through the UN. That doesn't mean necessarily that tomorrow this is going to happen. This is about trying to think beyond the conflict we're in today, what has to be a solution for peace in that region? And for that to happen, I think we need to move on from just stating we need a two-state solution to being really clear about trying to align those Palestinians, some in Gaza, some in the West Bank and some elsewhere, who do not support Hamas, but actually want to see some resolution. And I think Netanyahu hasn't helped this. I think he's contributed to this through some of his actions. And I have defended the Israeli government, and I have defended Israel in terms of its response to what happened 2 years ago. However, I've been totally appalled by the complete chaos that Netanyahu and his government created in terms of aid, where people are having to walk many, many miles to get food and water, and in doing so have risked their lives because it's been absolute mayhem when they've tried to get aid. I've been concerned by Netanyahu's attitude, and even before Netanyahu, around the illegal settlements of Jewish families in areas that are up for negotiation for the future.
Don't you think this announcement is actually going to embolden the settlers, and it will actually mean that the Israeli government encourages them?
Well, this is about the future, isn't it? And about whether there are voices in Israel, and there are voices of Israel who want a different solution. Netanyahu, since Keir Starmer announced his intention, has almost doubled down on building more settlements in the West Bank. He has also, I have to say, doubled down by saying that he doesn't believe there should be a Palestinian state. And in that respect, sadly, he seems to echo Hamas's view that there should not be an Israeli state. So I think it's about looking beyond where we are today to the future for those kids, Palestinian kids and Israeli kids who want something better than what we've had over the last 2 years and the last 40 years.
Gillian Keegan.
Well, I think Scott's hit the nail on the head, actually, without any conditions. It was completely unconditional, and that's why...
That's not true.
That is true, and that's why it's been seen by many people to be supporting Hamas. And Hamas themselves, I think, have celebrated these statements. I think the thing that I think about, and it's very complex, and of course everything, isn't so black and white there. But the hostages' families are very much against this move. And is it worth the risk? Because does it really help to get a two-state solution? Pretty much most commentators don't think it does. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference, particularly with the US in the position that they're in. So when the hostages' families are saying this is not helpful, then I think we should listen to them, because I don't think it is helpful. I do think it's probably a bit performative, and it's probably a bit of party management, as Gordon says. But if the hostages' families, who are in a much more, let's say, frontline position than any of us, don't support it, then I support what they say.
Amy.
I just think the whole situation is just desperately sad on a human level. Like, we have to do something, because on both sides, innocent people have been caught up in all of this with everything that happened on October the 7th and the hostages and everyone living in Gaza. Like, as a mum, like, seeing all the children and, like, them specifically stopping, like, baby milk going through on the aid trucks is just awful. I mean, I'd hoped this was going to help, but I don't know that it was going to.
Can I just say something? It's not unconditional. Keir Starmer has said there will not be a two-state solution with a Palestinian state with Hamas in control of that. There is no future for Hamas in Gaza. And just on the hostages, I completely understand concerns of the hostages, but some of those hostage families have been very concerned about Netanyahu's approach to this as well.
Yes, they have, but they specifically condoned this behaviour. Specifically,
what is interesting, Gillian, about Netanyahu and how he's doubled down is that when it has come to the hostages release, actually for every one hostage, Israeli hostage, that has been returned, many more Palestinians have been released the other way. So I don't know. So somewhere in those discussions, in those negotiations, even Netanyahu has actually conceded. It's not one back and one out. It's actually been one back and many more Palestinians released.
Of course, because he's been threatened. Because he's been threatened, as are the hostages. That was the whole point of taking the hostages. But within that situation,
in those negotiations,
that was the whole point of taking the hostages.
He was prepared to concede that. Now, within anything, there are words that are said in the public domain, but the question is whether anything behind the scenes can be resolved. And this statement by, first time we have members of the G7 in Canada and France and the United Kingdom come out for this, is about an intention about where to go.
Did that many months ago.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just talking on that about the G7. And so we've got 150 countries that now have added to in the UN out of around, I think, 193 countries in the UN. So it is about an intent for the future, because at some point, all of us who believe in a two-state solution, Hamas doesn't, and it sounds like Netanyahu doesn't either.
Hamas have welcomed this.
Hamas have welcomed a way forward,
and the hostages' families haven't.
Peace.
That's as clear as day.
Well, the French President Emmanuel Macron is now speaking at the UN, and he's announcing that France will also officially recognise the state of Palestine. Right, we'll move on to an equally controversial issue in a moment, and you won't be surprised to know that it concerns Nigel Farage. It's 8:15.
LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
16 minutes past 8. On our panel tonight, we have Gillian Keegan, the former Education Secretary. How much do you miss it?
Being Education Secretary, I do, because, I think we did a very good job on education, and I think, quite frankly, the Labour government is not doing a very good job on education. But the rest of it, I'm having quite a nice time, I must say. I'm enjoying my gap year. It's a
you
bit
are,
late, my
because
gap
every
year.
time I see your Instagram, you're off in some far-flung part of the world, so
Yeah.
you're certainly getting around.
Yeah, well, it took me many years to take this gap year. It's a bit later than most.
Are you likely to come back to the political fray?
Not as an MP, only because, I've done it for 7 years and I'm 57. I'll be however old before.
You never are.
I know,
Was there too much of a gap there?
But, I just don't believe in going backwards. I've never gone backwards in life. I've always just gone forwards. I've always lived and worked abroad. I've done different things, different industries, different companies, 30 years in business, 10 years in politics. We'll see what the next 10 years bring. Some fun.
Okay.
That's her pitch for a job out there, so she's available.
That's all you.
Luckily, I've earned my way out of that having been a requirement, but I'll do fun things for sure.
Well, that other voice you heard there was Caroline Flint, former Labour MP and Minister. You've quite enjoyed. I've always got the feeling you would rather have stayed, but I think you quite enjoy yourself, don't you?
Well, nobody wants to lose an election, that's for sure. But, as soon as that happens, you have to do other things. And also, that was my situation was compounded by, we then went into a global pandemic. So it was like an enforced retreat from everything, sort of thing like that. But, look, I joined the Labour Party in 1979, so I'm coming up for my, 45 years in the Labour Party. So a little bit older than you. My birthday last week, 64. And so, it's a different sort of thing. Politics is about who you are and what's in your sort of DNA, I suppose.
But you didn't go back to stand again, did you?
No, because my constituency disappeared and I've never really respected politicians who basically run around looking for someone else.
Yeah.
And I did it for 22 years and was, obviously I lived in my constituency. I still live up in Doncaster. And so I had as much invested in that side of being an MP as trotting down to Westminster every week for all those years. And to be honest, when my constituency and the boundary change just got divided up into three, the idea of trucking somewhere else didn't appeal.
Yeah. And Gordon Rayner has been at the Telegraph for goodness knows how many years.
I don't even want to tell you.
Go on.
And Amy Hart, influencer, which is a strange word, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's what we call people who... you're also TV personality. And it's a bit of a strange existence, that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically, I'm a freelancer who just does lots of different things. Just like I host lots of podcasts and do it presenting and then do social media stuff and try to use my platform for good.
And a new mother as well.
Well, not new anymore.
Relatively.
2.5. So, I suppose in the grand scheme of his entire life,
Okay, let's go to our next caller. It's Ben in Clacton. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Ian, and good evening, panel. I want to know the panel's opinion about Nigel Farage's decision to abolish indefinite leave to remain and threaten to get people out of the country who've got that position.
And somehow he imagines that he will save the country £234 billion. I would love to know on which fag packet he made that calculation. Gillian Keegan.
Well, I think the people who came up with that number have already said that number's not reliable and that number's actually been withdrawn. So I think, what this is about is a political move to say, and this is typical of reform, everything that's wrong is all about immigration and we could save a load of money. And if we save a load of money, we wouldn't have to make any difficult decisions. In fact, we could give you loads of tax back. We can give the two-child policy and all of the, whatever that is, 180 billion or whatever they committed to in the last manifesto, which I'm sure they'll increase again. After saying all that, it is clear, and it has been clear for a while, and even when we were in government, I personally was involved in us increasing the salary threshold. We also got rid of the visas for families of master's students. They were never there for undergraduate, but for master's students, because that had been a big increase. So we were always looking at, where our system needed to be tightened up. And indefinite leave for remain was definitely a discussion at that point, and has been discussed about whether it should be increased to 10 years, whether we should have other conditions as well. We seriously have to have effective deterrence for illegal migration, and then we have to make sure that we have a system that our country can cope with. And clearly it's the number one issue, because people are feeling that we haven't got that balance right. And, for every immigration decision, and people will talk about, there was, I think the reforms say things like the Boris wave, etc., and they'll point to this large number. And I was in government at that time, and that number was largely one-off things like Ukraine, Hong Kong. There was also Syria and Afghanistan. There was also a healthcare. Yeah,
but a lot of people were given visas because we needed them to work here. I mean, that was the overwhelming majority of those.
There was, and there was also a visa which we introduced for just 1 year, which was a social care visa for 1 year. And it was introduced at the time, if you remember, when we had 12, 13, 15-hour queues of ambulances outside of A&E. And the reason was because the pandemic, there'd been a shift in the social care market, and we didn't have enough social care packages. So, every time, if you think people are doing things without a reason, and you won't have any of those things to solve them.
You were in government at that time. You're not apologising for the Boris wave.
I think you'd need to break each one down and say, would you not want the Ukrainians to come, the Syrians to come? Would you have wanted to continue with the 15-hour waiting lists outside A&E? Or would you have wanted us to wait another year or so till we trained up more people in social care? I mean, we're doing things like boot camps. We were doing all kinds of things to try and get our own workers trained, particularly. I mean, I remember training thousands of heavy goods vehicle drivers straight after the pandemic because, all of them had gone home as well. So there was a very...
Sounds as if you're doing it personally.
No, I just got the money to do it. I just got the money to do it. I'm not sure they'd be delivering many heavy goods if I'd have actually trained. Although I did, at one point in my career when I was an apprentice, I did actually do a forklift truck.
Did you? And they're not... I used to drive a forklift truck. They're not easy to drive, are they?
No, they're not. Particularly not in the 80s when I was doing it. It's not the same technology. Probably beeping differently. But no, I don't think... but I got the money to do it, to put those things in place. So, all of those things, when you're faced with governing's harder than shouting from the sidelines. And when you're faced with those real decisions, you have to take real action. And people do move on and forget those. So I actually do feel that we ought to remind them that that decision wasn't made in isolation of the fact that we had ambulances queuing outside of A&E, for example.
Hart.
So I was at a barbecue a couple of weeks ago with some Reform voters, and they were giving it the whole, it's not the legal ones that we have a problem with, it's just the illegal ones. And I said, do you genuinely believe that once the illegal migration issue is sorted, that will be the end of it? And they, yeah. Well, today I have been proved correct that I said that was not going to be the end of it. I think it's disgusting.
Because the numbers are different, right? The numbers are tiny, really, in comparison for the illegal to legal.
And, our healthcare system and our social care system is built on foreign workers, and myself and my family have had such amazing care from them. I think I was reading something today about, if they're fine unless they start claiming benefits. I was like, okay, so someone works for the NHS for 10 years, looking after us in our times of need, and literally leaves their family in a different country to come over. And then they have an accident at work and they have to have 6 months, a year off work and have to go on to benefits. They get deported for that. What a kick in the face. I just think it's so wrong. I think these people come and help us when we have the labour shortages, and I think they shouldn't be treated like this.
Caroline?
It's interesting, actually, because the government brought out a white paper in May of this year, in which they had a number of interesting points. One was that they were going to end the recruitment of social care workers from overseas. That's happened. 2, they were going to reduce the number of actual jobs that you could through, I think, one of the skill visa programs come into the country, and they've reduced that. And another interesting aspect, which relates to Ben's question, and I'm sorry, Ben, if you're listening, because my earpiece went out, so I didn't hear the whole question, but I'm reading it here, is there's also, under the consultation, looking at the right for leave to remain and extending it from 5 years to 10 years. So it's quite interesting, this, because all the political parties, in one way or another, and that would include Reform, are grappling about what do we do about having an immigration system that is both reasonable and fair, but also deals in a common sense way with some of the issues that have occurred. There's been a lot of focus, obviously, for obvious reason, about people coming illegally on the boats. I actually was a Home Office minister. It's one of the reasons why that has been happening is that we actually cut off the routes to come on lorries and
Yes.
other ways into the country. And therefore, to be honest, good old Channel was the only place less to come through, because we had, for example, advanced passenger information on airlines. We had heat sources coming through from France onto the ferries into this country for the lorries. And all of that stopped that trade. And this is the route we're now having to deal with. So it's a consequence of actually firm action earlier on to do that. But the other thing is about people who come into the country who actually then want to stay here. And I think it's fair to have a discussion about what time limit should be set in place to do that, but also what rights you would have as well.
Sure, it's fair to have that discussion, but effectively, as I understand it, they're proposing to look at this retrospectively.
Well, I think that's another issue. That's another issue about what do you do around people who've already been given it. Now, there are issues within that, though, Iain, about people who have committed horrendous crimes. Nobody's
going to argue that they shouldn't just be deported.
The rules say if you've committed crimes, you're not supposed to get the visa post-IDL.
But there's one of the things I think for the public that politicians have to be better at is explaining just what these rules are.
There's 4
because
rules, and
honestly,
that's one of them.
It's hellishly complicated.
But
some of the issues that we are assured are in place to prevent people. Sometimes, unfortunately, we hear stories where it comes out that we're not
enforced,
acting quick enough,
enforced
quickly enough. Yeah. So this is about, I think, most people who are concerned about immigration and the consequences. I think the vast majority of people, it is the number one issue amongst the public. It plays into their concerns about housing, about access to GPs, about getting jobs and everything else. Is what they want to know is how do we make sure we've got a system that is fair and it works, and we don't look like we're running a chaos.
If you're somebody who's been in this country, say, for 20 years under indefinite leave to remain, and suddenly you're made redundant, as I understand it, under Nigel Farage's new system, you'd be out.
Well, I think that's nonsense. I think all of that is nonsense. And I think, to be honest, I think the British public are pretty weary of, false dawns, new dawns. So, whether it's the Veranda scheme or some other scheme, this is going to be the magic...
stopping the votes within 2 weeks of coming to power.
I agree.
Okay.
People are fed up with those false dawns that exist, and this would be a false dawn with Farage.
Well, I think you talk about false dawns. Part of the reason that Reform is doing so well is because, Brexit was a false dawn, wasn't it, for a lot of people? They thought that the Tory party was going to crack down on immigration, and instead immigration has gone up considerably. Net migration in 2018, 2 years after the Brexit vote, was 200,000. Net migration in 2023, 900,000. So regardless of why that was happening, that is a wave of people coming in.
Boris wave.
Yeah, and I think the Boris wave thing is really interesting.
Or pandemic wave, you could call it, actually. Post-pandemic wave.
I don't know. It's a very clever thing
or
for him to have done.
War around the world wave.
He's coined a phrase, you've used it already, Boris wave. What he's doing is he is associating in people's minds a sort of wave of migrants with the Tory party. Yeah. And that's very clever. Because everybody who knows who Boris is, they associate him with the Tory party. And the more people say Boris wave, the more he's ramming his point home. And it's very smart politics.
Yeah.
But
at a top
hang
level.
on a second. Brexit was supposed to open up this country to not just EU citizens being able to come here, people from the rest of the world.
Yes.
Whereas what Nigel Farage is doing is actually, I think, an anti-Brexit measure, because he's saying, oh no, we're not going to deport any Europeans, but we will if you come from the rest of the world. I mean, you couldn't make it up.
Well, it's because the people who voted for Brexit thought that we were going to control migration, which meant they thought it was going to come down, and instead the Tories controlled migration by saying we're going to let more people in, and we've chosen to do that. And that's not what people thought they were voting for.
But some of these issues, predate Brexit and are separate to what we had was freedom of movement under the European Union. I mean, look, I'm not going to say that there weren't mistakes the Labour government, pre-2010 didn't make, but we had 14 years of Conservative government. to get on top of this issue, as they said. And unfortunately, they haven't. We haven't trained enough people in this country with the right skills for the right jobs. We still have too many children leaving school with actually little to show for more compulsory education than in any era of public education in this country.
Well, that's not actually true,
well,
is
it is true. It is true.
We've put in the apprenticeship system, which has trained millions of apprentices.
But is it actually,
and it's older people being able to...
Well, if it was working, Gillian, why are we having such problems when we want to sort of create growth in infrastructure?
Because we have an ageing population, and we have not got the social care workforce. Neither do we have the social care reforms. I was the social care minister, and we were supposed to introduce the reforms which would enable us to actually reform the costing of it as well, how much people are on the hook for. All of the Dilnot report, all of that, we were actually going to do that. But then that was another thing that
the social care reforms
got thrown back by the pandemic.
The social care reforms, but to be honest, Gillian, it's way before you became an MP. This has been going on.
I know, but we were actually doing it, and I was the minister actually doing it.
No, we had a problem, didn't we, about in politics, and you may not feel you can say this, but I'll say it. When it comes to something like social care, we need the main parties to deal with this as an issue, like pensions, like other things, where we actually come to a settled
raised the levy, the 1.25%.
You criticised Labour when they talked about looking for a way to funding. We criticised Theresa May when she said it. And meanwhile, there are more people doing unpaid hours of care who are in work today than it's not.
Doing it. It needs to be done.
It's pertinent to where we are today.
The more money you put into the NHS without fixing social care
period of time was not going to change that with the best will in the world.
No, but the levy would have done.
I think they do want to get back into politics here.
Can I give Amy the final word? Because I've just had a little voice in my ear, yes, from Corey, saying, ask Amy what Love Island viewers would make of this proposal. No.
Well, I can't. Love Island is a very highly watched show, so I couldn't possibly speak for everyone. Yes. But I will say one thing. Actually, I probably haven't got time to go into it, so it's fine.
I mean, to be serious on it, I think that this is a subject which is going to be of interest to the Westminster bubble. But I think that where Nigel Farage always hits home is he appeals to people who are not particularly interested in politics, but they think, why should these people have indefinite leave to remain? And, I mean, that's where I think we're going to see another boost in his opinion.
There's always easy answers, aren't there?
There is an interesting policy that they've apparently... there is an interesting policy they came up with. It was just a little bit of political trivia, which is one of their policies is that for every migrant that comes into work for an employer, the employer has to fund the training of someone to work alongside them. That actually was once a policy of Ed Miliband that he took into the 2015 general election.
Fat lot of good it did him.
But I'm just saying, there are common causes on this issue.
OK, 8:33 is the time on LBC. Time for the LBC News headlines with Darryl Jackson.
The French President Emmanuel Macron has announced at the United Nations that France now formally recognises a Palestinian state. It comes after the UK, Canada, Australia and Portugal also made the move over the weekend. Several charities have cut ties with the Duchess of York after she sent a gushing apology to Jeffrey Epstein for publicly disowning him. Sarah Ferguson's spokesman says she emailed the convicted paedophile before he sued her. And Reform UK say they'd force all migrants with permanent settled status in the UK to reapply for visas if they win the next election. Stricter eligibility rules have also been outlined as part of plans to overhaul the immigration system. LBC weather staying mainly dry across the UK tonight. A few showers possible in the far southeast. Lows of 7 degrees.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:36 is the time on LBC. With us on the panel tonight, influencer Amy Hart, former Conservative MP Gillian Keegan, former Labour MP Caroline Flint, and Associate Editor of the Daily Telegraph, Gordon Rayner. I've never been quite clear what an Associate Editor actually does.
Oh, don't ask that, Ian. How long have we got?
Everything.
It depends where you work. In my case, it just means that I do an awful lot of stuff across everything that we do, and let's leave it at that.
Did you not enjoy being political editor more?
I did. Did I enjoy it more? It's
actually
very intense.
No, in case they're listening.
It's very intense doing that. You can't do it forever.
Right, let's go to a text question from Andrew in Fulham. Given the use of the new Gatwick second runway will cause a huge amount of environmental pollution, is Rachel Reeves' decision to endorse this a sign of a visionary chancellor or one who will now do absolutely anything to achieve growth, given the damage her other policies have done to the economy? Caroline.
I actually think it's a great idea to allow Gatwick to have a second runway, and I just think some of these decisions we should have made before. Look, clearly, aviation is an issue that contributes to our emissions, but it's not the headline one. Domestic transport is the biggest contributor to emissions, followed, I think, by housing emissions and then industry in the top three. And I think it's around 9% of our emissions in the country come from aviation. That's not to say we shouldn't do better in terms of where aviation's going in the future. But I think, aviation is really important to our country's economy, the sort of jobs it can provide, on all sorts of skill levels for all sorts of people. That's what you want, is sectors that can create multiplier effects for people, from people straight from schools to people who've gone to further education, all the way up to whatever, the highest qualifications that you might need. So I think it's a good idea. So I don't think it's a sellout, because actually, what anyone says about net zero, and I recognise climate change, I recognise we've got to do something about getting to net zero, but part of that should be to shape our industries and sectors to reduce their emissions, look at the best technology we can do. And I think countries that are at the front of this are in the best position to sort of pull together the greatest minds, the greatest scientists, the greatest inventors to come up with low carbon and net zero solutions.
Why do this in Gatwick, in one of the richest areas of the country?
Because they've been waiting for ages. They've been waiting for ages.
But why not have another runway in Birmingham or Manchester?
Because they've had a temporary runway, I think, second runway going on in Gatwick for some time. It is, I think, second to Heathrow, our biggest, busiest airport. I'm looking for my colleagues around the table.
It's the busiest single runway airport.
And honestly, I think we just have to get on with these things. And that doesn't mean that in other parts of the country, and as I say, I live up in Yorkshire, we shouldn't have regional hubs around the country as well. Right. But I thank God we're starting to make some decisions on these issues.
Yeah, I think it might be the first good decision she's taken since she became Chancellor. It's cool. Well, look, I think Caroline made a very important point there, that it's all very well sort of, worrying about the green lobby, but there are ways of having aviation that is sustainable. You don't have to kill it off just because, the green lobby shout about it. You can use more sustainable aviation fuel. That's a little bit off. There are ways that you can reduce contrails, which are a huge part of the contribution they make to global warming, just by changing flight paths and altitudes and things. There's a lot of things you can do. So I don't buy the idea that it's somehow environmentally destructive per se to have another runway. And to your point about why don't you have it elsewhere? Well, you can do both. Why not have another runway at Gatwick and expand elsewhere as well?
Well, the actual answer to that question is because people want to go. Airlines want to go to Heathrow and Gatwick. They don't particularly want to expand to Manchester.
Well, they will if the demand is there.
Well, they would, but there isn't. That's the problem.
Well, there you go.
Amy.
This is very close to my heart because I worked at Gatwick for 9 years. I was cabin crew. And when I was there, someone said I think that we'll get the second runway rather than Heathrow. And I thought they meant really soon. So I was like, brilliant, new routes, I can't wait. And now obviously I've been out of that job for 6 years and it's just come in today. I think it's a great thing. I think with the sort of pollution stuff, another thing with Gatwick is a lot of the time you're queuing, whether it be in the air, circling, they always say, it's rush hour, so we've got to circle for 20 minutes. You're like, how is it rush hour? It's rush hour all of the time. It's an airport. Or waiting on the tarmac, with the engines on. So that's all causing pollution as well. So hopefully this will free up some space. And like you say, with the jobs, obviously they'll expand the terminals, more eating places, more coffee shops, more shops. So it creates more jobs for lots of different people. And also Crawley, there's a lot of housing development going around Crawley, so you get new first-time buyers in there, jobs at Gatwick, everyone's happy. I love it.
Jobs are good. I've got to ask this. What's your most memorable experience from your days as cabin crew?
Oh, I had Mark Thatcher on my flight.
That counts as your most memorable experience. I was looking for a disaster.
I don't know my most memorable, but I just thought you'd love that. But I had a really cool man actually who I was chatting to in first class, and I asked him what he did for a job, and he said, I used to make clothes. Actually, same theme actually. I used to make clothes, and I was just about to retire, and then I sat next to Margaret Thatcher at a dinner, and she was complaining that men don't need a clothing budget because they just wear the same suit with different ties, and that now that she was Prime Minister, she had to have different outfits for everything. So I had a few too many wines. I said, it's fine, I'll make your clothes for you. And he ended up working a lot longer than he wanted to because he started making all her clothes.
Is he head of Aquascutum or something? Is he? Gillian?
Well, I think on the Gatwick point, I think we're probably all in agreement. I mean, it should have been done a while ago. There are some expansions in regional airports. I saw Teesside, and they are regularly putting on routes, and I follow Ben Houchen, so I see every time when there's a new route to Malaga.
He's the mayor of Teesside.
He's the mayor of Teesside, yeah. So I think that, you know, there is always been a growth in demand. I mean, you know, Liverpool, where I'm from, there's now loads more airlines going out of Liverpool than there used to be. So there is a growth, I think, in the regional airlines, airports as well. But Gatwick and Heathrow, clearly, you know, for business and also for leisure travellers, they're very important. And you have to be able to separate these decisions from, you know, how we make aviation more environmentally friendly over time. And there will be technology that helps with that. But most of the people that are campaigning, and, you know, I understand that because actually I live not that far from Gatwick, and, you know, you do get plane noise, and actually one of the things they have to do is mitigate the noise. And that is something as well that future technology will get better. The newer aircraft is less noisy. But largely it's people who are campaigning against that.
Given there's actually an existing second runway at Gatwick,
Yes.
which is used as an emergency
Yes.
one, all they've got to do is widen it by 12 metres, which
It's apparently
doesn't sound
too
much,
close
but
to
actually
the other
it's
one.
36 feet or whatever. Does that really need to take 5 years? Why does it always take so long to do these things in this country? So there won't be any extra flights or passengers until after the next general election, which sort of defeats Rachel Reeves's object, I'd have thought.
Well, it won't help the growth in the short term, will it? Which is the thing that she's got a massive problem with. All the things that she's done, and she's got a budget on the 22nd of November, so far have had the opposite impact on growth. So it won't save that, even though obviously it's an announcement today. It's not going to have a material impact on the numbers. But infrastructure projects do take too long here. And, you know, reading some things, there's only one, I think, that's been seen as a success. But mostly it takes too long. The specifications, the government legislation, all the mitigations. I mean, other countries don't do it like this. We really have to get to grips with how we do our infrastructure.
I think if they can do it in 5 years, I'd take that, considering
It's better than most, yeah.
compared to other big infrastructure projects that never see the light of day. And if they can do it on time in 5 years and on budget, that would be amazing.
Well, luckily there's no taxpayers' money involved in this at the moment, he says. It's 9:15.
LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:46 on LBC. Let's go to our next question. It's from Michael in Sunderland. Michael, hi. What would you like to ask?
Hi, Ian, and the rest of your panel. Do you think it's about time that we start teaching kids in state schools about finances? Because I was lucky enough when I was 13, I worked for a post office doing a paper round, and the owner learnt me all about the finances, about percentages and this, that, the other. And he allowed us to buy big jars of sweets off him, which then I would wrap up and sell them at school. I was only 13, by the way, which was a lot cheaper than the tuck shop. But I was making like 5 pence. Bear in mind, my bar was only 5 pence then, so I was selling it for 10 pence. But it taught me a lot about money and about finances, and I was able to retire and have my own house mortgage-free by the time I was 55 and enjoying my life with my grandson now.
Do you know, it's fascinating you should ask this, because I was at a dinner party on Saturday night, and there was somebody who works in the financial sector, and he was really bending my ear on this, saying, look, can you do a programme on financial management for kids at school? So it's such a coincidence you phoned in on this. Gordon, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to ask Gillian how much kids are taught about this sort of thing in school, if at all. I certainly think that I've got 3 kids. They're all grown up now. They are very different in their attitudes to money. They've all had to work it out for themselves.
But they all know about the bank of mum and dad.
They do exactly that, which is open 24/7, as you will know.
More fool you.
Yeah, exactly. But look, I think things like pensions. One of the things that I'm always trying to bore my children with is to, start a pension as soon as you possibly can. We all know the benefits of that. They just think you're an old windbag. I think if they'd been taught that at school, they would have taken it more seriously. And that's the sort of practical steps that I think really could be drummed into them from an early age.
Amy, as the youngest member of the panel, you'll have a view on this.
I do agree, because I think a lot of people, I'm very lucky that I can go to my parents, I can go to my accountant, my husband's very financially savvy, like I can go to these people, but if you don't have that network around you, you're sort of on your own. So if it was taught to everyone, it sort of puts everyone on a level playing field. Also, I think about the risks, because there's so many dodgy people on social media showing like Forex trading systems, like different types of crypto. I know a lot of crypto is legit, but it's like just showing people that what you see maybe isn't always what is made out to be. Sort of teach them the risks of investing and sort of the pros and cons of it.
So, Gillian, cut out geography or history from the syllabus and put this in.
Well, obviously there's loads of people who have a view of what you should cut out and what you should put in. There is a part of the curriculum which is for this type of education, which is quite a broad part of the education. And some schools will do it better than others. And there's lots of programmes actually, and lots of banks have put programmes together, and there's lots of companies that go in as well. But the way our system works, and I used to get this a lot when I was education secretary, and I'd say, actually, when I go to a school, kids would say, could we have more financial education, for example? And I'd say, well, that's actually up to your head teacher. Your head teacher, they're very autonomous. They have a lot of delegated power. So if you go to France, every kid will be doing the same thing all the time. The curriculum is almost rote from the government. We don't have that system here. So it is available, but I do believe it is not widely used as possible. And there's also adults as well. I was having a conversation the other day, and people were saying, how much have you got in ISAs? Now, bearing in mind they've been going for years, since I was a kid, and I've been investing in them since then quite a bit. This person who was asking me was a CFO of a company and had hardly anything in ISAs, and I nearly fell off my chair. So knowing good debt and bad debt, knowing the power of compound interest and the difference it'll make to your pension, even if you put a small amount in, it's amazing what a difference it makes over the years. And bringing that to life, I think, is something that I even find most of my adult friends have not got the savings that they will probably need to have a comfortable pension. So I think if you do it young, I know it's hard because you don't have very much, but you'll really remember it in the years to come, where you won't remember what you bought with it instead.
Well, like Michael, I had my first job at 13, 2 nights after school, and it was in Jock's Newsagents. And basically everything then you had to add up in your head as you went along. You didn't have a till that you could put different things in it. It would add it up for you. And likewise, when I had my first bar job at 18, again, it was in the days where you had to literally you did the rounds for people and you'd be adding up as you go along. I mean, look, I when I was an MP, there was quite a lot of lobbying by banks and others to have like finance skills in schools. I think that's a worthy thing, but part of me sort of feels like it's not about adding more things onto the school day. It's about how you make maths interesting and real, and how you can be creative about when you're doing algebra, how you would apply that to a real life situation in terms of measurements and schemes and what have you.
Have any of us ever applied algebra to a real life situation?
But when you were at school, when I was at school, I wasn't great at algebra. The maths teacher used to say, just look at it. And I'd look at it for an hour and I still wouldn't work it out.
Too.
But, it's about those sort of things, isn't it? Like, arithmetic, being able to know if you've paid, if you're getting the right change, how you do percentages, how you do think about how your savings and how you build savings. So I sort of feel the best schools with the best teachers are really thinking in all the subject areas, including maths, how they can make it imaginative, how they can make it creative. So there's some real world application.
Maths has got a lot better in the country, and we've introduced something called the Shanghai method, which funnily enough came from Shanghai, and it is it's really transforming maths. And actually maths is now the number one A-level choice because we did say to young people, if you do maths A-level, you will earn more. And funnily enough, after a few years, it went from being number 8 to being number 1. People are logical.
I don't disagree with that.
And they're crying out for for that understanding.
Gillian, I don't disagree with that, and that's great. But not every child is going to go on to do A-level maths.
No,
so we've got to have a point.
But it's the number one A-level
which
today.
When children, young people finish their, if you like, at GCSEs. They've all got a basic standard.
Yes.
Everyone. They don't have to have an A grade. They just get a pass in a basic standard to have the skills for life.
Right, we can fit in one more question because you've all been admirably brief on that one. Harriet is in Egham and she says, by the way, Michael, thank you for that question. In between all of the marching band stunts, etc., the Lib Dems actually did come up with a policy at their conference, it seems. 2-hour limits for kids doom scrolling on their phones and health warnings on apps. Is this the solution to our kids becoming zombified phone addicts? I must admit, I do love a bit of doom scrolling on the train. It entertains me.
Doom scrolling. I call it joy scrolling.
Yeah,
because nothing fills me with greater joy than sitting on my phone.
Inspirational thing.
And like TikTok, you learn so much. Like my algorithm is so different. Like there's a woman at the moment. She's been in prison in the US. She's recorded 276 TikToks about her experience. I'm working my way through them, learning so much.
Gillian.
I think as an MP, the experience is probably a little bit different. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I put out the guidance to ban mobile phones in school when I was Education Secretary. Now there's discussions whether that needs to be made into law or not, whether schools are following it. There is certainly something that parents and everybody's grappling with and not really understanding how we should get that balance between young people, particularly how much time they spend on their mobile phones and also what they're learning on their mobile phones. Obviously, we've had the Online Harms Act. There's all kinds of things which are coming in to try and deal with a situation which does need dealing with. I don't think we've probably got there yet, so we ought to keep this conversation going. But, a 2-hour limit, if you're watching, the wrong things, 2 hours of the wrong things is still not the right solution.
I was just going to say, for us, though, we're joy scrolling, doom scrolling. I have a toddler that asks me questions every 2 minutes. I've got husband talks to me. I've got lots of friends that talk to me. I have public-facing jobs. So for me, when my social battery is low, the doom scrolling is very nice. But we know now that teenagers, they're more inside than ever. They can't go out and hang out our town centre. There's nothing for them to go and do.
But do you worry how you're going to introduce your child to this world?
I memean, unfortunately, and I'm ashamed to admit this, but because we're all on our phones around him, he does know a bit. He knows how to change the video on YouTube, but it is hard how to do it. But I think if it encourages them to go out more and speak to people more, they're going to get those social skills. So I worry that the teenagers of today and then the kids that are growing up aren't going to have those social skills because they're in their bedrooms.
So Caroline,
Gordon, you've both got adult children. Aren't you glad
Absolutely.
That you didn't have to bring your children
100%.
up in this age because of this sort of thing?
100%. I mean, it's just like magnified the problems of peer pressure on young kids and teenagers. And I mean, we could spend a lot of time about the awfulness, even when parents, and I've listened to parents who are doing all the right things, they're doing the settings, but still their children are exposed because someone at school will show it. I've come to the view, rightly or wrongly, that actually a child probably under 16 should not be given a smartphone. You can use other phones if you're worried about safety, so you can buy those sort of phones. Don't buy a smartphone. I actually now, and I think adults need to show it as well. So in the last few months, we have at home what I call the phone prison. And we basically, my husband and I sit down for the night because we're terrible. We'll watch telly and basically we'll see something and say, oh, what was that actor in? And we're literally on the phones like this sort of thing. So we now have our phone prison where it's on the other side of the room and we put our phones in and then we put in it 2 hours, 3 hours, and it locks and it opens after that time. Adults have to show.
Has anyone ever told you you're just weird?
No, I don't think that's weird.
No.
I don't think that's weird. I am sort of basically not going to lecture others if I'm not trying to do something myself.
It's going to get harder
and
with
I
AI,
think that's
though,
really important.
because AI is going to be used for everything, and that's probably the phone that will get it through.
I think Amy made a very important point. What qualifies as doom scrolling? I trust that looking at the Daily Telegraph or even maybe the LBC app is not doom scrolling for a start.
No, we would positively encourage it.
Good way to spend your time. So, but on a serious level, look, my youngest child is 21, so I'm been very much part of this whole problem in terms of bringing up kids. And the difficulty for parents, obviously, is that if you try and restrict them too much, they end up getting bullied because they're the one kid that doesn't have what all the other kids have got. I think parents would love to have some sort of hard and fast rule that everyone had to stick to so that you wouldn't have to be making your child the odd one out.
But that's where Gillian is right about banning it.
That was the schools ban. That was to give parents the cover to say, look, it's obviously not good for you if the schools are banning.
This is the strangest fun question I think we've ever had from Ollie in Manchester. Scientists have found that wild chimpanzees are regularly getting drunk because they're eating lots of ripe fruit, which is going through the fermentation process, which turns sugar into alcohol. So which member of the animal kingdom would you most like to go for a drink with, and why? Can't believe I just asked that. Gordon?
My first thought was elephant, but then if I was buying the drinks, that would probably be a really bad idea.
Expensive night.
So I think I'll go with cats. I love cats. I think they're very funny. They're very composed. They're very cool. And I think once they'd had a few, it'd be interesting to see how they sort of started losing their composure and, start
they become more like dogs?
Yes, probably.
Caroline?
Well, so a couple of my favourite animals are orcas and polar bears, but I'd be really worried they'd eat me for a start. But I think probably dogs, because I actually think dogs are more sociable than cats. And I think it would have to be a dog. Yeah.
Any particular breed?
I don't mind. I mean, our last dog was a rescue dog and a bit of a mixed breed, and they were pretty friendly, I think, and hardy. Hardy.
Amy?
Mongrels are usually hardy.
I thought an elephant because they have great memories, and I love nothing more than sitting with a glass of wine listening to people tell me their anecdotes from their life, and I feel like they'd have a lot.
Gillian?
I've got to say newts, because there's got to be a reason why people say pissed as a newt.
Very good.
Let's see if they clip that up on our website. Thank you to all of you for coming on the programme tonight. On tomorrow's panel, we have the Reform UK Party Chairman, Dr David Bull, Lib Dem frontbencher, Munira Wilson, Labour MP, Stella Creasy, and Gordon's colleague from the Daily Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, who I've listened to her on various programmes. I think she is so impressive. Mm-hmm. Not that you're not, but she...
Thank you very much. I think that's called dumbing with thin praise.
Well, in a moment, we are going to turn our attention. In fact, we're going back to the subject of our second question, Nigel Farage's announcement on a new policy of reform. They're going to stop people with an indefinite leave to remain from staying in the country. They're going to adopt a new system. I want to hear from you if you have indefinite leave to remain. How has this made you feel? Because I remember hosting lots of debates during the Brexit years about European citizens and their concerns. I'll tell you what, if I was one of you, I'd be thinking about quitting this country now, and I wouldn't wait for Nigel Farage to get into power to push me out. Or is that an exaggeration? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, France has joined the UK in officially recognising the state of Palestine. President Macron has told a UN summit the world is moments away from being unable to secure peace in Gaza.
The time has come to do justice to the Palestinian people and thus to recognise the state of Palestine, a brotherly country, a neighbour in Gaza in the West.